You're listening to the Vint Podcast, where we bring you interviews and stories from around the world of wine and spirits. From winemakers and critics to sommeliers and master distillers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping the future of today's food and drinks culture. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vint Podcast. My name is Brady, joined in studio by Billy Galanko. How you doing, Billy?
Great. Excited to talk about working in the vineyards this week.
Yeah, we're getting back to my farming roots, although I think my grandparents on their dairy farm had maybe like some Concord grapes in the back. I have no idea what kind they were, but I know that they were more like grape jelly type of grapes that sometimes they would make, and no one ever touched them in terms of pruning or tending to them at all. It would just be, walked outside and now they're grapes. We should make some jam out of them. So it's good today to talk to a real viticulturalist.
Yeah. No, for my times working both in Australia and then with the winery here in California, I love just talking to viticulturalists, and it's so interesting to get the passion that they have and just learning all the nuance that goes in. And literally, we'll talk to him a little bit. Like, he drinks wine, he knows what goes on in the winery, but it's like the vines are his babies, and then people come out and they discuss when to pick, but he lets it go from there. And it's cool to just think that somebody's full-time job is just focusing on how to make these grapes grow efficiently and produce the best fruit possible.
Yeah, and it's a nod to the business of wine too, like the fact that there are specialties in each of, obviously there would be a specialty, someone who manages vineyards, but there are certainly small wineries where the winemaker also does the vineyard management and works in sales. But we're talking with Norm Peters today, who's the director of vineyard operations at Silver Oak, which is a pretty sizable operation with broad distribution. And so it's interesting to see how that works behind the scenes at a facility that's producing fine wine at fairly large quantities.
Yeah. I think everybody's seen the Silver Oak label in their grocery stores. They have multiple tiers, and their prestige wine is considered one of those well-known like icon wines. It's not like the most expensive wine from Napa, but it's definitely one that almost I think anybody knows. And I know my fiance will go to these real estate dinners, and you put that out at one of her conferences, and all the guys from around the country are like, "Oh, cool, Silver Oak." So I think that's really cool. And I think his background in particular kind of first started as a kindergarten teacher. I had no idea. That was that was interesting. You don't hear that every day. But then learning the process from the ground up, and then also sourcing grapes from like a big company like the Wine Group. That's a huge kind of consortium. So you got to go around and source fruit and see how people were growing all over the country, which I thought was really interesting, and take all of those things that he's learned and put them into his practices. But it's nice just to talk to a guy who's like salt of the earth. All he really wants to do is go out there, farm some grapes, be in the vineyards. It was really cool to hear that. Very humble, no pretense. It's like the opposite of what people think about when they think of Napa wineries, really.
Yeah, we talk about that, and he says the same. For him, it's all about maintaining that humility, treating people right, which is part of the conversation around sustainability of their business. Also, it's not just sustainability in how we talk about it in the vineyard, but it's also treating people well, allowing your folks who work with you and keep the machine running, helping them to thrive. And so I thought he had some good thoughts on that as well. And you can tell that he's an educator, was a teacher, was a principal, and went to school for administration. And so I think all those things come together and make him a really great manager of people as well in his role.
And I just want to add that we do get into some kind of, no pun intended, get into the weeds a little bit on certain topics here, like certain disease and like water. I think it's interesting, and everybody should keep in mind when they're drinking their wines. At the end of the day, a lot of wine, like some of the most famous winemakers and wineries in the world are the farmers, like you were saying. They go out there. So at the end of the day, this is still a farm-based industry, and thinking about all of the little nuance that goes into getting enough of those grapes to make wine, I think it's really interesting. So while at first you might be like, oh, I don't want to listen necessarily about farming, it's not like a famous sommelier. I think it's really cool to think about these little elements that go into what makes your grapes. And then I also like it because I think people here have heard me talk about this grapevine in my neighborhood. We have a lot of grapevines in our neighborhood. I love to walk around and see how they actually sprawl. If you think about it, the native like activity of a grapevine is climbing up a tree, and then with the ultimate goal of getting their berries eaten by birds, which to me is, I was just telling my fiance this the other day, to me, like bird nets over grapes are like the ultimate Romeo Juliet story. because like they're meant to be together, but yet
Yeah.
we're stopping them. I finally have a little cutting from a grapevine that I am now propagating in my backyard. It is not that fine. The one I had originally talked about, they cut that one back, and it's in like a public park. So I felt weird. It's like a community garden. I felt weird just cutting off the 2 shoots that now exist because they cut off all the arms. So I was just walking down the road, and there was one that was like sticking way out over the sidewalk, and I was like, all right, this is mine. And I cut like a 4.5 foot piece off. That was horrible. Can't propagate something that big. So it started dying left and right. So I cut it down, and now it's in a little grow box. It hasn't died 2 weeks.
Do you have any idea what it is?
No. And I was like, in my head, these are definitely wine grapes, yada, yada. And now I'm like, oh, they probably are like Thompson seedless and they're meant to be table grapes. But I'm going to hope they're wine grapes, and we'll see.
Do you know if it's white or red at all?
No, I'm going to have to keep going back to the mother vine later this year, because the cutting I had actually had grapes, like baby grapes already growing, like post fluorescence, like they were fertilized and they were going. So I'll be able to go monitor the mother vine and see what I'm working with. But from the shape of the leaves, it's androgynous for now. So I'll figure it out in time. But I'm just hoping for roots.
Mother hen Billy with his mother vine. Actually, Norm on this episode, he talks about the business that he had where he was helping people set up vineyards in their backyard, which I thought was really cool. That's like a great niche business. Seems like
that's very much what I want.
Yeah, the perfect niche service business in California. So I wish that had been my idea. Everyone would have a vineyard in their backyard when I was done with it. But that's awesome. Yeah, so I hope our listeners enjoy the conversation on viticulture from the Director of Vineyard Operations at Silver Oak and Twomey, Norm Peters. Hey, Norm, thanks so much for joining.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have a true vineyardist, a true viticulturalist with us. I see you got maybe some maps of probably blocks, vineyard blocks and plots back behind you there.
Pretty fun, aren't they? They're really nice maps.
Tell me, I know you've had a career at a number of different spots and you've done your own thing as well. Why don't you give our listeners just a brief background of how you got into the space? I think were you in construction at one point as well?
Yeah, I went to St. Mary's College, a little Catholic school, to play football at when there was Division II. And I was there, and I had a year left. I didn't know. I had a couple courses left over. My mom said the teachers in our family. I got a graduate degree after my BA and was a teacher. Believe it or not, I was a kindergarten teacher for the first 5 years because that's the only job in elementary that was available. And I did that for 10 years. And then I put myself through college with construction as well. And my brother worked for a construction company. So every summer for 15 years that I was a teacher, I went back to the construction company. I had my own crew and got after it. Really enjoyed that part too. Different lives, right? Teacher being proper, and then I could do all this construction and work really hard. So that was the basis. And I got my master's, decided to be a principal. I really liked that aspect of having a bigger effect on everyone. And just got my master's. There was budget cuts. The vice principal jobs disappeared overnight. And I was back in a K-1 classroom. And that was all good. But Tom Baldacci, which owns Baldacci Vineyards in Stag's Leap, was one of the partners of that construction company. He just bought a vineyard in Sacramento in the Clarksburg area, which is on the Delta. You go really nice Pinot Noir grapes. And he said, Norm, come run this. And I was like, what? Okay. So I drove a half hour away from my house, looked at the vineyard. I said, I'm going for this. So I put in a leave of absence and thought, what have I got to lose? I always have teaching. And so I went out there and showed up, July, I think like June 28th was my last day of teaching. And July 2nd was my first day of being on a farm. And boy, that was a challenge. I knew absolutely zero. And found out real fast I love farming. We're wheat farmers back in Montana where my mom was from, and loved every second of it and just went nuts on it. And then did that for 10 years, made wine there for 7 years, and decided that the wine business was not profitable. So I told them, hey, this is not profitable to do this. Just grow the grapes. Don't do the winery. It took them 2 years to say, okay, we understand. I went to the wine group because my kids were little and I was spending my life at the vineyard and the winery. and bought grapes for the wine group, which is Cupcake, Benziger, and thought I would get no experience in actually buying grapes and being quality control and going out to the vineyards of the best growers, the worst growers. I learned more in 8 years there, just seeing 60,000 tons of grapes all over Lodi, Clarksburg, Sonoma, quite a bit of experience. But I lost the farming part, and I missed that. 6, 7 years into that, I started a business, a backyard business, because I saw a niche and did backyards for people in the East Bay, and really had fun with the architecture and trying rootstock, trying different clones, trying different approaches. And my kids were the labor in the beginning, and then it got big, and then decided my kids were out of going to college and everyone was out the door. I thought I need to be in operations again. And I was at Trinchero for 4 years and found Silver Oak. I was really looking for that company that had the same exact philosophy I did, and really happy I landed here. Been here a year and it's just wonderful.
You said a backyard business? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Are you talking about just like, hey, someone who wants an eighth of an acre of vines on their home property?
Right. So the construction company I work for, Castle Construction, one of the guys' buddies was a doctor and said, he has a vineyard in the backyard. You've been doing this 10 years. Can you help him? So I helped him and had fun. And I thought, okay, I was looking for that other thing to do to keep me in the vineyard game because I wasn't installing trellises. I wasn't managing people. I was managing other growers as a grower relations rep for the wine group. And I did that. And I really needed that because I'm a farmer. And it totally blew up, and had all these vineyards in Walnut Creek, Concord, San Ramon in the back of people's yards. I put in with my kids and eventually employees, and that was really interesting. And then I would manage them for the year, right? Because what do you do with grapes? They think it's just landscaping. That's a lot of work. So that was a lot of invoicing and billing and equipment moving, and that was really what gave me the basis of a lot of stuff. And how do you plan to get everything to where it's going within the windows, which we'll talk about later, is you have to hit the windows in farming or you're going to not have a good year.
You, I guess, talk a little bit about just briefly what you do now for Silver Oak, and then also just taking a step back to talking about the different varieties that you've worked with and maybe how the farming varies from some of these places. Like you've mentioned I farmed in Sonoma and Lodi and Napa. I think for our listeners, it might be really interesting to say what are some of the challenges or things they might not know about that's different growing grapes in those different areas.
Right, Billy. I think you nailed on the most important thing for everyone to know is what AVA is, right? American Viticultural Area. And Fresno is one, and Napa is one. And then there's a sub one is stand sleep in Napa. And that pretty much determines your price of grapes. And it's like a house. We might think our house is worth $800,000, but it's worth $600,000. We can't make it worth $8,000. So it's like that. And the different regions have different climates. And in Napa, for example, in Sonoma, it's cooler and not 100 degrees, 40 days like it might be in Napa, like in Fresno. And it's the right conditions for growing Cabernet. Cabernet wants to grow in the conditions in Napa and in Sonoma and Alexander Valley. It's very nice too, but it's not as concentrated, but it's still wonderfully good to drink. But Cab in Fresno is going to be hard, right? So that's super important, is that there's a couple of things. There's no bad wine. There's just a bad wine for the price. That's one of my things. And there's bad wine. I have to frame it that way. And you can't grow 15 tons an acre Cab in Fresno and expect it to be Napa. But you also can't grow 3 tons an acre Cab in Fresno and expect it to be Napa. And also, if you're in Napa and don't grow it right, it doesn't matter if it's 3 tons. It's really important where you're at to grow. And what's the regions? Like Russian River comes to mind. You think Chardonnay, that's wonderful, and Pinot Noir. And it belongs there because the climate is cooler. There's a lot of fog. It's not really hot. The heat doesn't bake the flavors out of it. That's really the essence. However, it's important to know that each area is different, and you do farm a little bit different, but farming is farming. Lodi has some great Cab, for instance, and Clarksburg, which is where I was with Trinchero, had a 2,800 acre ranch, really tight next to each other. Clarksburg, really great Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs. But if we try to do Merlot and things there, you're not going to get what you want. So you really need to know what you want. And I'm going to bring up something from the wine. When I was with the wine group, we got a lot of Sauv Blanc from New Zealand, and the New Zealand growers would come over, and I would show them a tour. And actually, they came last week because I'm still friends with everyone I work with, and met some New Zealand growers. And I took them to a vineyard that had Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay. It had 20 varieties on there, and they said, "What are you doing to me?" And I said, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "There's 20 different varieties. You know what we grow in New Zealand? Sauv Blanc, barely any Pinot. One spot we grow Cab." And I think that is so important, that it's not your backyard. You just don't put whatever you want in it. You really have to focus on your AVA and what will grow well if you want to hit that home run. But at the same time, we do different things. It's like Cab is not going to be the same as Chard.
It makes me think of we bought a blueberry bush, and you look at the tag and it's like zone 3, and it's like, well, we're zone 4, but close enough. not necessarily how it works for growing grapes. But you've mentioned,
right.
Yeah, I guess it's the same.
I put roses in the shade before in my house, and they don't work there.
Yeah.
No matter what I do, I'm not going to get a flower out of them.
You can't water them or prune them enough to make it happen, huh? You keep referring to yourself as a farmer, which I expected you to, but it seems like there's a juxtaposition, right? And especially in my mind when I think about a place like Napa, which in certain ways has become probably overplanted and a bit commercialized in certain spaces. And so that's on one end of the spectrum. But then someone who still views their operation as, hey, all we're doing here is farming, feels like the other end of the spectrum. How has that changed maybe over the last 20, 25 years from who you've been around, and just in thinking about how many folks are really still considering what they're doing out there farming versus a commercial practice?
That's a really good point. And I think it's important to be humble, and it's important to not be important. And one of the reasons I landed here is the Duncans, who own Silver Oak, have that feeling. They're very incredible people. And I talk to Tim and David all the time. There's not levels of importance. And I think that philosophy is very important. And I'll chime in when people say, "Norm, you don't belong in Napa. You don't belong up there. You're salt of the earth. You're a totally regular guy." And I even had a little prejudice about Napa, quite frankly, because I was a Central Valley guy. My nickname was Big Valley because I get things done, right? And coming up that way, yeah, there's some definitely places that have some history and have some tradition, but there's a lot of good working people in Napa. I'd say most of the people that live there, except for the owners and a couple people that won a couple awards and got to feel like they put it on their chest. That's fine, they got that award, but we are farmers, and that's what we do, and that's what I love. And so my title here is Director of Vineyard Operations, and I grow relations too, because we buy a little bit of grapes. Everyone does that. They have their own vineyards, but you gotta spread it out. You can't have everything in one basket, because there's a lot of great vineyards we get grapes from. So that's what I do too. But farming is about farming people and getting them to be the best they could be, and then have them get the vines the best they could be.
I'm sure you've done like a bit of travel, both domestically and abroad, meeting with other farmers and understanding how other folks do things in other places. What are maybe a couple of those experiences that have stood out that you brought back with you?
That's a good question. Other places. I think asking questions and just questioning everything, not in like a critiquing form, but when the New Zealand guys came over, that was really fun because they were showing me a different outlook. And I think that beginner's mindset of not thinking you know it, and maybe that's kind of Napa thing, is this the way we do it? Don't get stuck in that. And I think that's here or the farm next door or in New Zealand. That's super important to be open-minded and not think you have something solved before you know what it is. And grower relations is really probably the thing that opened my eyes most to that, Brady, because I saw so many growers, but I saw growers that were horrible. And I learned, and I saw growers that had the drip line and they put it above the canopy so the machine wouldn't mess it up when it's shaking. And I just experienced a lot of different mindsets. Now that costs a lot of money. You have it here at 20 inches, you put it up here at 60 inches, and you have to rewire everything. But it was his vineyard and he didn't want to fix it when the machine damaged it. So that probably experience there of being around more growers that had more ideas that worked and didn't work, really just, hey, why are you doing that? What do you think? What do you think? Put it here. Put it here. And so that philosophy is try it. Try it on a couple vines and see how it works. Don't try it in 10 acres or 20 acres or 100 acres. And that has really been my success here and at Trinchero. It's try something. Oh, I don't think that'll work. I want you to try it in 5 or 10 vines or 5 or 10 rows that are short. See how it goes. Then you tell me if it works. And then someone tries it. It's like, that is the way to convince people, not to have them just do something, because that works. And a lot of situations, especially at Trinchero, it's how that lifting wire up and down takes a lot of work and pulling it, and that pushes the canopy up and exposes it to the sun. And weather's changed. Things are too hot, and I don't think we need this anymore. Everything will get burnt. No, it won't, because we leave it up. It grows like this, and we don't trim as much, and we don't leaf thin as much. Get light. I had 8 vineyard managers over there, and they didn't like the idea. And I'm like, okay, one of them who was open-minded, so let's try it in one block. Just leave the wires fixed. Don't bring them down. Leave them fixed. The shoots will grow up. You won't have to tuck the shoots. You won't have to pull the wire up. You won't have to cut the wire. You won't have to leaf blow. And it was a huge success. And over there now, they don't move wires up and down because it could get so hot that it could fry it, and you need leaves. And I think the key to grape growing is to try not to inhibit the vine from doing its job. Try not to manipulate it too much. We still got to shoot thin, we still got to leaf pull, but try to let it arch a little bit and do what it's meant to do. Because those canes go like this and they go back and forth, and sun will go in and out of there. But if we manipulate it too much, all sun or no sun, with the heat that we have, not last year, it was a wonderful vintage, but 2 years ago, the year before, could hurt you pretty bad, pretty fast if you don't have a little protection.
I love I'm trying to grow a little baby cutting of a grapevine here, and I keep telling my fiance, like, dappled sun, that's what we're going for. Just a little bit of this, not too much one way or the other. But I think that's really interesting. I was going to ask, is there something else aside from like canopy management or like other things that maybe might be climate related? It might be like pest related, sharpshooters or something. It is like Pierce's disease is what I was getting at. But are there things that you're doing that are working now that you never thought of before, or problems that have come up that are now like requiring new solves, and people who aren't, like you were saying, aren't basically coming around, are losing either volume or vines, and then other people are flourishing?
Right. So I think there's farming. There's so many things that are new, and that's what's scary. Things don't go away. Unfortunately, problems really don't go away. I'll answer that in a series of questions. One is, what can we control? We control the amount of water we can put on or can't. That's the one thing we can control when we have waters full of wells. 2 years ago, we didn't. So that's important to manage that. But it's important to understand that there's mealybug, there's virus, there's wood disease, which has been around forever, but we take it for granted, and it goes 2 inches a year from a bad pruning wound. And pruning is probably the biggest thing, Billy, that's changed how we do it. We leave a little bit of wood and don't go right next to the cordon, and that protects the vine from getting disease and it traveling. So even though it's old school, there's some things that we've been doing forever that have been changed, and it's nice they changed it here. I know where I was at. It took me a long time to get them to prune differently and leave that little nub, because that protects when you prune, disease goes in that wound. And if you prune too close, it'll go right into the vine, and then you still can't stop it really unless you cut it out. Just not getting comfortable with solving a problem. And it's really hard to solve problems when it comes to virus, Pierce disease, and all these things. There is technology out there, and they're looking for inoculations. And there's a lot of work being done on these problems, but no one has a silver bullet yet. And the biggest thing we could do is find out what it is. First, identify the problem, which is huge, right? Because we look back there, I have a lot of vines. I'm not going to know every vine there. So finding the problems, identifying them and slowing them down and taking vines out that have virus in a certain area because it grows like this, right? And bugs spread it. So knowing where it's at, knowing what rows it's in, not put a piece of equipment through that and send it to a block that doesn't have problems and spreading them. It's just really being conscious of everything. And like I said, it's difficult for anybody. If you have 10 acres, you could really, really focus down. On some of our ranches that are isolated, we can focus down because it's just there and we could really isolate. But that's a challenge for farming. And I don't think the tech and the bio technology is there yet, but in the future it will be. And we're waiting for answers to virus and disease instead of just finding it, like I said, and taking vines out and replace them when you can, because that's expensive and hard. And then you have this part that's growing and is ready to go, and this part that is not. And then this is at a different brix than this, and you want everything to be the same. So that's a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I like the Pierce's disease or sharpshooter example because it's like one of those where the disease itself, they haven't really made a lot of progress, but like with the pheromone traps and trying to basically deter the bugs from coming and multiplying, and like that way slows the disease. I thought that was a really interesting solve, thinking like a couple steps back rather than just focusing on the problem itself.
Right, and I think that is important. You can always mitigate somehow, and like mealybug the same way. It's some pheromone traps, timing of sprays at the right time, and ants spread mealybug like they're playing blackjack and they're a dealer. And if you control the ants, you will control them too. So it's just really thinking out of the box and looking at the whole picture. Like bluebird boxes, I had someone tell me a couple months ago they put bluebird boxes in for Pierce disease. There's bluebirds all over now, and they have less Pierce's disease because they like to eat those little critters. It just seems like there's always something. And now it's the lantern bug that's back east. Really don't want that to get over here because that's just devastating on crops. But we're a global world, like we found out with COVID, and we just have to be ready and farm clean and farm neat and be aware and have scouts in the field and stop things as soon as you can, because otherwise it's too late when a field's eaten up with stuff. You got to pull it out, because when you put something back in, it might be virus up again.
Can you talk about some of the human capital that goes into sort of practices around sustainability and proper cultivation of the vineyards? What kind of practices have you seen evolve around managing a crew, educating folks around getting everyone to buy in on a single idea about how we're going to do things? And just what does it take to build a team that can actually execute on what you're talking about?
That's huge. And I think people are, like we talked about, you grow people in management, not grapes. And it's the company I'm at, Silver Oak, their philosophy is such that, and it's refreshing to come to a place and they are what they said on the videos and everything. It's not marketing, but you do have to care, and everyone's on the same team and everyone's treated the same. And that's really important. And that is a big component of sustainability, right? Is the people, the farming, and my three components of sustainability, right? People, number one, treat them well, and the people are people. Your people, we're all the same, so we should be treating each other well anyway. Is that the case always? No, but treat the people well. Sustainability has a lot to do with treat the land well, right? And it also has to do with, and people overlook this, is the company has to profit to pay those people and treat them well. And this is something, Billy, I think you said, which I really liked, and I was going to bring up as my big philosophy is do you guys play golf by any chance? How many clubs do you have in your bag?
Yeah.
Billy?
12, 15.
Okay, so if you're, like you said, you like to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, sometimes it's sustainability or treating people or treating the land. We want it to be far right or far left. And sometimes sustainability could be really far right. and don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But I think it's really important in life with people and with everything is if you have 12 clubs in your bag, you're only going to use the 3 iron very rarely, but when you have it there, you got to use it. So sustainability is real important that way. I feel like some groups do try to don't spray and don't do all these things. I'm not saying I want to spray and I'm not spraying that, but it's important. Sometimes you got to do some things to correct an action. And if you have a putter and you have a driver in your bag and that's all you use, you're not going to be a very good golfer. So I think it's very important with the land and people and profitability that you have to look at everything. And sometimes you may have to do this. You don't want to do it all the time, but sometimes you may have to do this. Sometimes you may have to do this. But overall, your practices are in the middle. But sometimes we have to go to the right and left. And that's super important. Not everybody's the same. Not every vineyard's the same. Not every critter is the same in response to non-conventional means. And if that critter gets all over, or that weed gets all over a vineyard, you have no choice but to pull out the vineyard. So really we need to balance life and balance what we're doing. And the sustainability groups are great. If they push us to do things we don't do that help those 3 things, great. They're great. But when they're pushed just to have a philosophy of no this, yes this, I think the best sustainability groups have points and higher points for the things you do and like lower points for things that, right, you don't necessarily all want to do. And sometimes you have to do that. And you have 2 points, but then it's an overall point system. And that's basically the way they are. That's the key to really sustainability is, right, is doing a little bit of everything right.
Yep. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Also, I realize I 15 would be a really lot of clubs, so I definitely have 12 or less. But yeah, can you talk a little bit about, I think when people think about human sustainability, they're thinking maybe like when they're in the vineyards, making sure if it's too hot, they have water, they're not out there maybe, or if there's smoke, they have the proper masks. But can you talk about all of the aspects, both maybe in the vineyard and winery, as well as outside, like how you're supporting them to live a sustainable life as well and be happy outside the work too?
Awesome. That's an awesome question. So today I'm driving up and I see a truck with 5 jugs of water, and the water's cooled. It's not just room temperature or the heat of the day. It's going to be a warm day up here in Sonoma and Alexander Valley. It'll probably be 80 degrees. But just number one, having plenty of water everywhere, and education is the key to everything, no matter where you're at. So we just had a heat information packet and safety meetings last week because the heat's coming up. Okay, if you're tired, go over and get a drink of water. Are you drinking this amount of water a day? You need to drink this amount of water an hour. If you're feeling lightheaded, that's probably the biggest change I've seen in the last 10 years, which is wonderful because we just grinded, and I did, and the people did. We were grinding, and we just didn't realize. And it's changed. And safety is number one, and education, letting everyone knows that if you're feeling lightheaded, how much water did you drink? Look at your buddy. Listen to the way he or she is talking when you talk. Brakes are important, and that used to be loose 10 years ago. It's not loose now. This exact time we're taking a break, even if you have to walk 5 minutes to get to where your food is, we're going to do it. That's added in. So it's not a 15 break. It's longer than that. So really that pressure off everyone to keep moving fast. And part of the pressure in moving fast was a piece rate, which we don't do in California anymore. We don't do here, is that for a vine, you might get paid a certain amount to prune it or to shoot thin it or whatever. And that's out of the picture now because the people would go really fast, but they'd also make a lot more money than they would hourly and be faster. So that is the other end of it, but that created some problems. So the more focus is now, especially up here, is all about quality, which is extremely fun to be a part of quality all the time. We'll do what it takes to quality. We go at a good pace, and we're not really running and trying to get to the next one and next one. even though that's the challenge is you want people to move quick, but hourly helps. And not 10 years ago, again, everyone would work 10 hours a day. That was a standard. There were no overtime laws then. And now there are, so people are working 8 hours a day. So the quality of life, I think, has really improved just for those. Sometimes they get paid less though, because now it's not 10 hours, even though there's overtime. You don't want overtime. So it's crazy with rules and regulations. They are meant to protect, but our job is to foster whoever's working for us. And like you said, we have English programs, and we encourage people who want to learn English and want to go to leadership courses. There's a lot of great groups in Napa and Sonoma, and a lot of our foremen and workers that do want to learn more English, because it is create a little more opportunity, more computer skills. There's so many things now that there weren't 10 years ago, and we encourage that. That's part of our one-on-one is the biggest thing. My biggest tool is a one-on-one with the people I work for, which is Nick is a vineyard manager, Allison's a viticulturist, Brad a vineyard manager, Dave a vineyard manager, one-on-one, and what do you want to learn? And then they have one-on-ones with their teams. What do you want to learn? I want to learn this. Okay, we'll get you in viticulture school. So we have 2 people right now taking Santa Rosa Junior College courses on viticulture and IPM, integrated pest management. They want to learn. Let's go. Let's learn and take an hour out of the day once a week to do that. So that's really important. Opportunity. Everyone deserves opportunity, and if they take it, anybody takes it, then we are offered it and given it, and that's what's really fun, to give people opportunity and say, hey, what do you want to do in the one-on-one? What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? You want to take my job in 5 years? Please do. Do you want to be a vineyard manager? What do you want? Oh, I guess I'm thinking then the next one-on-one, oh yeah, I thought about that. I want to do this. Let's get you some courses. Let's get you some training. And that's really fun. And that's what I love about this, is there's so much room for growth for everybody, no matter what you're doing. But farming, there's a lot of new thoughts and a lot of old thoughts we just have to update. So learning is great. And that's really, I think, the avenue. Maybe that's because I was a teacher and I'm doing this now, but that's the avenue to every great change I feel is education.
Yeah, the idea of not just maintaining the status quo, either in the way that you manage the vineyards or the way that you manage and treat people. And all those things flow upwards, I assume, at the end of the day, to quality when you're actually making wine. And so I wanted to touch a little bit here on the back side of the podcast about how everything that we've talked about the last half hour comes to fruition and is represented in the product once the consumer gets the bottle. So maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the processes that you guys have implemented that have had a outsized impact maybe in the quality or consistency of production over time.
Yeah, I think what's most fun about being here is there's a lot of science and test taking for grapes to see if they're ripe. And you could look on paper and something looks ripe. It looks great. The TA is this, the pH is this, the Brix sugar is this. Let's pick it. But like anything, there's not going to be AI for this, guys. You need to get out in the field. And where I've been in the past, I have been out in the field maybe once a week. If that, trying a grape, people have looked at the numbers and said, okay, let's schedule it a week out. Here this is the most incredible thing I've been a part of is we rally the winemakers, the viticulturists, the vineyard managers. Okay, we're going to meet at this vineyard in the morning. We're going to go 4 vineyards. Let's taste it. And we have metrics and we pick flavor, color, all these things. And I was taught how to use that scale. And we taste and we talk. What do you think? What do you think? Nate Weiss is an amazing boss and fosters that learning too. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think to the winemaker? What do you think vineyard manager? What do you think to me? Look about whatever you think. Okay, this is what I think. And so there's a lot of learning going on, but just the constant tasting, you cannot pick a grape just by a number. Because if it was that way, everyone would do it, right? Everyone would have amazing bottled wine. So getting out there, trying the fruit, listen to what I have to say, because there's a picking decision involved, right? You need machinery, you need people, you need this. There's so many factors that go into deciding to pick a grape. You have to have the tank right behind me. open. You have to have the trucking, everything. So it's not, okay, boom, but we move like that. So really getting out there and tasting it and deciding when to pick it, deciding a group meeting later, deciding how to schedule it, getting it on the schedule, saying no, sometimes it's too early, we can't jump the gun. Because let's say it's hot. If there's going to be a heat spike in 2 days and it's going to be 115, don't wait, pick it, right? The crazy thing about what we do is you have to think on your feet, and you have to be able to say no, and you have to be able to say yes. And that part's fascinating. But here we taste the fruit, and we get it in when we think it's ready. But when we're done, we all have tasting notes, and all of us vineyard managers, including, get in and taste all the lots, and then we rate it again. And so you can see that the vineyard department is not separated from winemaking here, and that's amazing because it's always been separated to a degree, and I really love that here is that we're not. We're together and we make decisions together. But they teach us, the winemakers teach us about winemaking and what can we do to make this better. And our big thing this year was a block party. Like, what's a block party? We want the winemakers to give us feedback on the blocks and what you think could have been better or worse, and then we're going to break that down and try to figure out what we can do better. So everything is cause and effect, right? It's just not, okay, this year's done. It is, how could we make this block better? How could this block was an A+. Wonder, here at Silver Oak, there's only B+ and above. If it's not that, it's not going in our blend. And that's the amazing thing, is the quality control is amazing. And you don't always get that. Sometimes you have a grape and you're using it. So to learn from that too is pretty incredible. So that's really I think the key is to be picky.
Nice.
And you can always be picky. And you know what? On a smoke year or on a 115-degree year, you can't be picky. But here we still are. Because that's why I'm here. We're going to do things right. We're going to do them right. And can't always do things right, but you could always strive to do things right, qualitative wise and people wise, right? You always strive to do that. And that's amazing.
Yeah, that's the real sign of a really high quality wine, is that in bad years you make less because there's more sorting and more all of that stuff that goes into it. I love to hear that. I would love to hear more about I guess I don't want to call it the Grand Vin because that's a French term, but the icon wine that you guys make. But before we move on, I want to go back to the tasting the grapes. It took me a long time because I always heard winemakers and viticulturists talk about tasting the grapes. And then before I learned more about wine, I was like, oh, do they just taste good? What are you looking for? Can you explain a little bit about, in terms of the seeds and the skins and like what people are actually tasting for when they're tasting the grapes, not just that they're delicious?
Yeah, exactly. So for everyone out there, Brix is the sugar level, and you might just pick a cab at 25 Brix, and that's a certain sweetness. But so what we do is you squeeze the berry for turgor, for the pressure before you pick it, and you see how much give there is, or if it's mushy, well, you might have picked that 2 weeks ago, right? But so you're feeling it, and then you put it in your mouth, and you're biting the skin again for the crunch in the skin, or if it's mushy, you're looking at the pulp. And if you squeeze, you get one and you squeeze it, and if the pulp pops out, it's still pretty gelatinous. So there's just, you're looking at skin, you're looking at the tannin, and when you have something, the top of your palate says, that's the tannin. Okay, it's really strong tannin. Does it need more time? Does it need less time? It's not just sugar. And even though I was a winemaker for 7 years in California Cellars, which was the original Poppycock Vineyards, I have a lot to learn, and they do things right here. So I am not the most savviest on all that part, and I'm learning, but I still have an opinion on what I think. But I have a philosophy. They do their job right. I'm not going to tell them not to pick it, or pick it unless there's a red flag, right? I will, on the operations side, say, you know what, that's going to be tough to do. Can we wait a day? Can we go earlier? But still, that tasted grape, if it's really bitter, it's really veggie, and all those, the bell pepper, the green, if you taste that, it's not ready. And if you taste the green at the beginning and you pick it, you're going to get green. That is what you do when you're tasting it, because the sweetness is a number. but there's so many nuances. Wow, that tastes really good. This field has been noticeably, it tastes good, but we need it to go longer. If we go a little bit farther, and that's what's important too, and because they're all our own fields and the growers we've had for a long time, they're solid. We know the fields. So you know the field, you know it could go a week longer and it'll be better. So tasting a grape, if you go taste a grape once and then you pick it a week from then because you think it's ripe, it might not be ripe. And it's not a timeline, and that's what the tasting of the grape. And my tongue on the end, I tasted grapes for so long that the end, I had a wound on there because the acid's so strong, and my teeth, I had to back away. I'm like, guys, I'm not tasting it today just for a day, because it's acid, it's acidic, and it's low acidic when it's not ripe, right? And so that part, you spit it out as soon as you can. Sometimes I swallow it because it's sweet, and don't do that. Don't do that, because if you're trying 100 grapes in a day, it's real important. It's really all about that, among other things. But you're going to know if something's not ready, for sure.
Norm, are you making any of your own wine now, even in the bathtub?
You know what, Brady, that's a good one. People asked me that more so like 15 years ago, because I got to make some pretty good wine at the end. I was pretty horrible good at the beginning. And I thought it was great, but it wasn't. No, the way I feel, I'm surrounded by so much good wine, and the winery, my office here, the vineyard's there, and the tanks are right behind me over there, and the barrels. So I'm not at this point in my life. I don't have any grapes at my house. I have a lot of grapes out here. Love grapes, love everything about them, but I'll let the experts do their job. That doesn't mean I won't someday maybe put something in and do it, but there's a lot involved, as you guys know. It's not just do it. You need pumps. There's so much stuff you need. So I'll just go over there and buy a case of wine and bring it.
Nice. Yeah, you're around it so much. Are you drinking wine at home? I assume you are, or are you drinking something else? Are you not drinking at all? What are you exploring these days?
I love wine. I will have a glass a night, and on the weekend for sure more than a couple glasses, 2, 3, depending if people come over or not, maybe more. But the wine's so good here. It's great. We're Twomey as well, which is Pinot and the Sauv Blanc, and the Pinots are out of this world. From Oregon, and just fun. So it's fun to have wine that's just amazing to drink. So a glass a night, but I like a beer. I like me a beer. Sometimes I'll prime the pump with a beer if I'm working at home because it's sunny out now, late. And I like whiskey. I like tequila too for the weekend. So yeah, I like it all. But yeah, absolutely. I got to keep it going. How about you guys?
Yep. Sorry, I was going to ask something else. No, I'm mostly wine in our household, wine, and we'll have the occasional whiskeys here. I think Brady's the same way, but maybe different ratio of whiskey to wine.
Yeah, it depends. We just had some babies, and so the last 9 months plus have been, if I open a bottle, it gets tough because I have to really commit. Although I have my Coravin, which helps with that. But yeah, I've been getting more into whiskey, so I'm probably like 50-50 right now.
It's good to have a little sip at the end of the night when the kids are asleep.
I'll tell you when they start sleeping, and then that'll be when I start to have my drink, but they're not doing that yet.
So before we wrap up here, I have a question I've been waiting to ask. I listen to all types of music, and one of those is country music, despite what people may judge me for that. There is a song called Cab in a Solo. Have you heard it before?
Oh, yeah, that's a great song. That's a great song, and it's funny because when it first came out, it's like, no way, we're in that Silver Oak, and so that's a great song, and it's gone up pretty high, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's on the radio. So for those who are listening, in the song, basically, I don't need to give you a synopsis, but this guy buys a 1998 Silver Oak, and it's one of the first songs that I've listened to where somebody's actually calling out like a vintage and actually talking about like a fine wine. They're not just saying like Moscato or just naming a champagne. So I was just like, I've been trying to get everybody to listen to it. Most of my friends don't like country. Other people just say they don't like the song, but I tell them it's deeper. He's not only drinking a cab in a solo, but he's in the cab of his truck by himself. It's so deep, and it's a great song. So
it's a great song. What's crazy is in the tasting room, we have libraries, so we have wine from every year that was here. People can buy it. It's super fun. So you could go buy a 1998. Isn't that crazy? And I'm sure a lot of those flew off the shelf. Not flew, because that's but because of that is super fun.
I'm going to have to rent a pickup truck and drive up and buy that bottle by myself in a cab.
Come on out.
That'll be great.
We'll walk you through the winery and the tasting room for sure.
We're super lucky to have Norm, who's going to do the chorus for us here live on the podcast.
Sing it for us. 1998. Cab and a solo in the cab of my truck. Yeah.
He does know it.
Silver Oak anthem.
I'm country all the way.
Thanks for joining us, Norm. We appreciate it. Thanks for on working the vineyards and treating people well, and we appreciate that. And excited to stay in touch. I may have you on again in the future.
Sounds good, guys. Have a great one, huh? It's been a pleasure.
All right. That was our interview with Norm Peters. I hope everybody learned a little bit more about viticulture. And also, regardless if you're a country fan or not, go listen to that song because it's just hilarious to hear somebody call out a vintage wine in a country song. That is the end of our episode for this week, and we'll be back with another interview next week. Cheers.